There's this mentality, particularly and supposedly held by the schlubs among the younger generation now regarding the galaxy far, far away, that those of us who are angry about the Star Wars EU being scrapped should just shut up and accept that our time has passed. I find this argument, much like Red Letter Media, so rage-inducing that it makes me more unstable than a Japanese nuclear reactor. Seriously, this entitled sanctimony is so insufferable it could be mistaken for one of Obama's policies or double as Amber Heard's integrity. And I hope to rebuke this dismissive hand-waving of what came before with the following. As I hopefully made clear in my piece on Palpatine, the Star Wars Galaxy is a spectacular franchise, acting almost like the Lord of the Rings of science fiction fantasy in terms of genre. Which this kind of has me agreeing with David Stewart. He once said that he believes that Star Wars is just a fantasy in a sci-fi setting, so yeah, I kind of agree there. Being so expansive and lifelike in terms of lore, but instead of humans living alongside knife eaters and short people, you have them living among various species of filthy xenos. Hashtag humanity first. Taking inspiration from a myriad of sources, from westerns to samurai films, noir, Eastern and Western cultures. In short, a shitload of stuff. Came in to influence this. And this was only for the movies, and this is somewhat continued in the expanded universe, otherwise known as the Star Wars EU, comprising of novels, comics, and video games. Actually, I should stop right there for a second. What I mean by is like, he took all these ideas and put them into the movies exclusively, but when they did the EU, they did somewhat similar things. I just want to elucidate on that. This expanding material was something akin to the Silmarillion for Star Wars. It is not comparable in terms of quality. For the Silmarillion was supposed to be akin to the Genesis of Middle-earth, while the EU is a different beast entirely. With the EU telling us on the development of Jedi and various factions in the galaxy, as well as the Republic, and its history, as well as expanding further the story after the original trilogy, telling us what becomes of Luke and his friends. In some ways, you could also compare the EU to, like, say, Fire and Blood by George R. R. Martin. In essence, expanding the scope of the galaxy far away, introducing us to various new cultures and Xenos, for example. This look at the Tong and the cultures that they created as their successors, the Mandalorians, a group that began like the Sith as a alien race, but then developed into a multi-species group and became this faction that accepts anyone regardless of their gender or species. As long as the individual meets a certain requirement, they're allowed in. The EU also introduced us to new characters such as Mara Jade and Darth Malgus and Revan without compromising the credibility of the OG characters from the movies or tearing them down, such as was the case with Rey in the sequel trilogy where they had to tear down Luke. Anyway, moving on. The EU was a diverse collection of content, not this shallow bullshit we see from the sequel trilogy in Disney. Like, it is so shallow what they made, it could pass as the credibility of a male feminist, but I'll move on from there. If you wanted a strong female character, you had the aforementioned Mara Jade, an Emperor's Hand, who was basically a personal assassin for Palpatine, who went on to become Luke's wife, and Bastilla Shan, who had a similarly complex relationship with Revan. In addition to this, you had, actually, no, I should probably start, like, imagine that. Imagine you're around on a Thanksgiving in Star Wars, and they're laughing about the old days, and like, yeah, Luke, remember that time your wife tried to kill you? Yeah, those were good times. Anyway, in addition to this, you had diversity of genre. Don't like stories about the Jedi exclusively, or they're too safe for your liking? Good news, the EU offers stories like Death Troopers and the Republic Commandos. There was a great variety of old EU content. This isn't to say the new EU is that bad, mostly because I'd rather consider castrating myself with a sawed-off shotgun at close range before I willingly read anything that was made by Disney. So I am a bit biased here. But the variety of the old feels more enticing. If a certain character presented in the movies leaves you wanting to know more about them, the EU has you covered. As I stated previously, the EU expanded the scope of the galaxy far away. This includes stories following the characters and events that involve them before and after the movies. There are a series of books about Boba Fett's adventures following the death of his father, as well as some comics about his exploits as well as his father's. There's one about Mara Jade dealing with the mental fallout of killing Jango, or not Mara, Mace. Sorry, Mace Windu, the asshole who was fond of the word motherfucker. You see him live with the mental fallout of killing Jango. There are others about Obi-Wan and Anakin, as well as several others in the form of comics and books. My overall point is not that the Disney canon should not exist, despite the fact I consider it glorified fan fiction and not the good kind of fan fiction. But that compared to the old EU, it is not as engaging for myself. There was some good quality control. An example of this I would point to is the book Deceived. And I am reading this at the time of preparing this. Its strongest point for yours truly would be its narrative and narration of the story. Contrast this with, say, Chuck Wendig's Star Wars novel, which from what little I know of his book, it was not good, especially in the depiction which I often heard was childish. But with Deceived, there's a great deal of concise and strong voice to the narration. It feels alive, and more importantly, it compels me to give a shit. If not for this reason, then there's to consider there was some attempt to be consistent within the old EU, whereas the new one does not try to adhere to either what came before, adhere to some form of logic in the galaxy of Star Wars, nor does it attempt to be concise with what new writers have established in their new, less enthralling EU. Granted, this point is more of a personal opinion of my own, based on what little I have heard and seen of the new EU. I refuse to purchase new material because Disney burned a bridge with me one too many times. If anything, this is the strongest point of the old EU. It may have been the result of so many people leaving their own mark in the Star Wars universe, but it was conducted by people with a passion for what they were doing, or at the very least, they were so, if not that, then they were, at the very least, so good as writers, you'd think the former was the true about them. With all this in mind, imagine how infuriating it is to see people so eager to memory hole this harder than Generation Y or John McCain's crazy statement. And that's where I think, those were my notes, and that's kind of why I find it kind of sad that the EU was discontinued, because there was a lot of good stuff. And like, they could have adapted all this shit into content. They would have made money off that, but they had to be stupid. And by they, I mean the schlubs at Disney. But anyway, it is sad. Like, here's the funny thing: I can actually walk away from Star Wars no problem, as long as I have the old EU content still. I would say, Disney, if you want to not piss people off, I would just continue publishing this stuff and still sell it. You don't have to continue; just continue to sell it, and you'll still make money. I mean, I can put aside my hatred for Disney and buy the Legends versions, even though I'm paranoidly convinced they might have altered some stuff, or I would not be surprised if they had. But yeah, I say just collect old EU and say fuck it afterwards. Just collect what you can and hold on to it. And this isn't me saying that the new EU needs to be discontinued. No. If you enjoy it, go with God, my friend. If you enjoy it, go with God. Maybe you'll, I don't know, not regret it in a couple of years. I don't know. I do not care. I just want to be able to collect the old EU and then move on with my life. Which apparently is hard for some people to fathom, because whenever we try to get the EU continue to be published, shitheads from the other side try to fuck with us. Like, I know this for a fact. Like, they've lied about us constantly. They say we're an Islamophobe or something. Anyway, that's getting off the point. The point is, the old EU had quality control and conciseness, despite what the hipster dipshits online might have you believe. I will contend that till the day I die. I will contest it till the day I die. And I would rather take the EU, which was at least inconsistently passionate and trying to make the best damn story possible, while at the same time not being bad, over something that is bad and unapologetically bad, based on what I've heard. Anyway, that's the video. Have a nice day, and well, pray for sanity. God only knows we need it.